Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back with you guys for another episode of what is our phone-in series for a topic which isn't particularly too comfortable, but one after this morning's show I really want to delve into a little bit more. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. As I say, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon and for what is a chat about a topic which comes up more often than I'd like, and probably more often than you'd like, and certainly more often than I know some people would certainly like on the channel. And it sparks from this morning's show, actually, and has kind of followed me throughout the day. I'm one of those people that, in a situation of being somebody who hosts a channel and is constantly bombarded with messages and comments, and thankfully plenty of them are very positive, and I thank those for sending them in. But you find yourself, and I'm sure people, don't run channels, do the same thing, but often if you put a tweet out, or if you put an opinion out, or put anything out on social media or anywhere, you find yourself scrolling through your comments, seeing if you've got any notifications, seeing what reactions are coming from that. And I found today myself being really locked in to kind of reading some comments and reeling from some comments that I've read. And I wanted to bring this up in a potential phone-in. I have left the link if you would like to join today's phone-in. And of course, you'll become more aware of what the topic is as I go further into this. If you'd like to have your say on it and have your thoughts heard. And that link is in the comment section. I'll probably leave it as well when I edit the this description of today's video as well. But yeah, to give you some context, this morning's morning show featured this comment. Now, Arsenal's women's team played and won, thankfully, after some second half heroics at the weekend, and beat Aston Villa. And as we always do, every single week, every single time there is a game in the WSL for Arsenal, or in the Champions League for the Arsenal women's team, or in the Conti Cup or the Women's FA Cup, or of course, if Arsenal was successful in signing a player for the women's team, every single time we bring it up, we talk about it, I cover it, I discuss it, because it's the Arsenal news show. It's not the Arsenal men's show, it's not the Arsenal women's show, it's the Arsenal news show. Because, for me, supporting the club is about supporting the whole club. And so you cover the club. My time is definitely more dedicated towards the men's side of things, and that is my job as well. So that's why we have such a greater emphasis on that side of things. But often what you can see on your screen here, and if you're listening to this on audio platforms, if I have indeed uploaded it, is this morning's morning show contained a comment which sparked something of a reaction throughout the second part of the show. This person left a comment saying, "No women football, thanks." Now, they may have been joking, they may not have been joking, but it certainly created an emphasis on the second half of this morning's show to talk and answer questions about the women's game, which I thought demonstrated the brilliance of the community that we've got here, because it was quite a nice middle finger, if you like, to the misogyny that we saw in the first half of the show. And what followed me throughout the day was a number of comments. Now, I'm going to show you some of these comments and read you some of these comments, and just to kind of, again, give more context to this situation and why I want to talk about it and why I want to get some of you on. And I can already see some of you putting your opinions on women's football into the chat. I'd love to have you on the show. I'd love you to come and voice your opinions. I'd love to question you on them. But one of the comments that I received this morning was this, and for those listening on audio platforms, I'll read it to you as well. "Hi, Tom. First of all, thank you for your Arsenal content. Great show." And I always find that it's quite ironic when these types of comments start with a compliment. Continuing on, it says, "I would like to comment in regards to people who are not fans of the WSL. I'm not a fan of it, but it is not in regards to gender issues or anything in regards to that matter. I just don't like it. Just like other codes of sport, whether male or female, it does not make me a sexist or a misogynist. I think your broad brush of people that not liking WSL is sexist is totally an unfair statement and comment. And I sure hope that you reflect on this in saying what I wish every success for the future." Now, of all the comments that I get, this is probably the best I can hope for in terms of not crossing the line. I don't think this person has crossed the line at all in terms of, calling me out. The issue that I have with this comment is that it's a misrepresentation of my view on the topic, because at no point have I ever said that anyone who doesn't like women's football is sexist. If you don't like women's football, if you don't have an interest in women's football, if you don't watch women's football, that doesn't make you sexist. Nor have I ever said that it makes you sexist, nor a misogynist. The clear difference for me is that if people are publicly going out of their way and making an effort to publicize that disinterest, publicize that dislike, or as you'll see with another comment, publicize their hatred for women's football, that's what crosses the line. So when you're jumping into conversations, if someone asks you for your opinion on women's football and you say, I'm not really into it, you're allowed to say that. That's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with telling people that. But what I want to make very clear to people that have this misinterpretation of what my view is or what other people's views are, I have never, ever once said that somebody that is disinterested in the women's game is sexist, because I don't believe that to be true. You're not. There is a line, and some people cross that, as you will see with some of these other comments. Long-time listener and love your work, but I don't appreciate your snide remarks about people who don't watch women's football. I hate women's football because I think the standard's crap, but respect anybody who does. There's no issue. You can't just assume everybody who doesn't like women's football is a misogynist or less of a fan, because it's just incorrect. Now, again, just to propagate this slightly once more, those who don't like women's football are not sexist. Again, just want to make that point clear. If that is your opinion, you hold that and you hold it respectfully and to yourself. I have no issue with that, not whatsoever. However, this comment, as you say, I think goes slightly a bit further. Saying you hate something is a bit different for me. I hate a lot of things that are pretty darn horrible. And hate, I think, takes this element of looking at the women's game into a different sphere. If someone said they're not interested in it, as I've said, I don't think that's an issue. If you hate women's football, I'd start asking some questions as to why you hate it. And saying that the standard is crap is not good enough, right? Because trust me, I've walked past the park and seen plenty of Sunday League football, and the standard is not great, right? I play football at a terrible level. But I don't think many people are going to watch me and say they hate me for it, right? Things can be of a poor standard in your opinion, and that is the clear point to put here, and you might hate it. Now, I personally think the standard of women's football has been and is at the highest level it's ever been, and is a very good standard, and I think it's improving all the time, and it's constantly playing catch up because of the lack of investment it has historically had and the view of it that it has historically had. It's really important to do that. And by the way, that was in no way a comparison between Sunday League football and the women's game, purely an analogy there. I just think that when you start using words like hate and then start talking about words like standards being terrible and that being a reason for you hating it, even if you ever could even justify that, which I don't think you could, again, it takes that one further. Now, one final comment before I start to get our callers in. And this was the one that really riled me, and I posted this on social media. I posted it without the name, and I've not put the names of any of these. You can find these comments on this morning's show. They haven't been deleted or got rid of. You can find them, but I don't think when these people left their comments, they expected me to put them up on the show, and so I thought it'd be fair to cover their names. But as I say, they are present, and you can find them on the channel. Again, this starts off with, I just find it really eerie that these always start off with compliments. But this person says, love your channel, but I do skip past the women's team info. Apparently not enough, because they're still leaving comments about it. But love your channel, but I do skip past the women's team info. Not because I'm sexist, with a rolling eyes emoji. You have match of the day and the WSL show for a reason. Same reason you have the EFL show, etc. Because it's all different. Same game, but different levels. You can't be calling people sexist for their preference. Again, just to highlight, never have, never will. And it's like calling a man racist because he likes brunettes. I'm just going to read that sentence one more time. It's like calling a man racist because he likes brunettes. Yes, that's how far some people are going with these analogies. FFS, he continues, or they continue, I should say. I hope you see true and stop painting that narrative, because it's completely false and wrong to say. Yeah, this one had me scratching my head quite thoroughly after reading it. A rather disgusting comment, to be fair, and certainly not. And for the record, and for obvious reasons, this show is not being monetized in any way, because I just want to talk about it. And certainly, I don't think it'd be going very far if it was bringing up comments like this. But it's not only a comment which obviously misrepresented my view in the first instance, but to go through and compare this situation to racism and to compare it in such a way that degrades the entire movement of trying to tackle racism as a problem in this sense, I think highlights perfectly the detachment from reality some of the people that hold these views have. So there's all the context. I said to my guest it'd be 5 minutes. Apologies, it's been 10 minutes. But we're going to jump to Alex, who I know actually does a lot of work coaching with women's football. So Alex, thank you so much for joining me. Obviously, you are one of our members and you've been on the channel plenty. So some of our listeners will recognize you. But yeah, you work. When I put the feelers out about talking about this topic, you wanted to come on and discuss it. So talk to me.
Yeah. So, oh, great start. Yeah. So, I think that my main issue currently is that surely if you don't enjoy watching women's football, keep your comments to yourself and you move on to the next part of the show or you mute it. But I think that I agree with you in terms of going out your way to purposefully say, I don't want to listen to this or I don't care about this. I don't understand it's just voicing your opinion, so it's slightly slippery ground. But,
Sure.
you know, I don't want to watch a Spurs show, but I don't go on to every Spurs show and say, I don't like this show because it's a waste of my time.
Sure.
So that's where, and when you look at, people who say about the quality or things like that, I think a lot of people probably don't know that there was, in the 1920s, there was, it was the golden generation of women's football, and 50,000 people turned up to a game in the 1920s to watch it play. And then in January of 1921, the FA decided they were going to ban women from playing football because it did not suit their nature, was their wording.
Yeah.
And then it was
We've come a
banned
long way.
for years. Yeah. So when you consider that, that's a very, very long time for no development in the sport, no one playing, no one being allowed to play, no one seeing role models of themselves in places where they're able to play, which is, one of the main things that attracts people to playing football is, if you see someone like yourself doing it. So that's the problem that I have. And where maybe the quality is not that of the men's game at the moment, it can only improve. And if you don't want to watch it, then don't. No one's forcing you to watch it. Just the same way, you don't want to lose listeners from the show, I know, but if you don't enjoy it, you don't have to watch it.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. 100%.
And most people
sorry,
have no
go on.
problem. Yeah, no, I was going to say most people on the show have absolutely no problem. And, you're going about your morning routine, whatever it might be, you're going around watching it and it's absolutely fine. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't understand why people feel the need to go out their way to come and say, oh, I'm not going to watch it. I hate it. It's terrible. Or one of the comments I've seen on here of someone saying the best thing about women's football is the blonde woman who plays for Aston Villa, who I'm assuming is Alicia Lehman.
Alicia Lehman, I assume they're talking about.
Sums it all up from what their perspective might be on it.
Yeah, and she receives a lot of misogynistic comments. Yeah, and I think in some ways it comes from a place of a lack of education. I've received, whenever I've talked about the women's game or had female guests on, for instance, there'll be comments that you wouldn't necessarily read and think, oh, this person's clearly horrible. They're leaving comments that you might even look at and think, oh, they're just complimenting this person, this woman. But in the context of the conversation, it's not appropriate. And you wouldn't get people talking about, the men's team in that way. So why aren't the women being appreciated for their footballing ability and for what they're doing in the women's game? What you said at the start as well, when you said, like, it's slippery ground because it's an opinion. I actually have had some reflections myself on kind of how I've dealt with this in recent weeks, where some people have left comments after I've talked about it on the show and they've said things like, I'm not interested in women's football. Like, they just left that blanket comment saying I'm not interested in women's football. I actually think in reflection, I might have been too harsh on those people that left those comments, because as you point out, Alex, that is just an opinion. And I've tackled the topic. I've brought up the topic of women's football. Is it harsh for me to say it's misogynistic to leave a comment saying I'm not interested in it? When I brought up the conversation, they're leaving their opinion. I'm not. I think there's a debate to be had there. But I think from what some of the comments that I showed up on the screen today, it takes it that little bit of a step further, especially when people start saying they hate it. It was that word hate that really hit me when I read
Yeah.
that comment. Why? It's a hard question to ask, Alex, and it's fine to say you don't know. It's an answer to a question few people want to use these days, but it's incredibly underrated. Why do some people choose the word hate when they talk about women's football?
I mean, like you say, it is difficult to answer. I think some
And
people.
please do feel free to say, as I say,
Yeah,
you
no,
don't
of
have to
course.
answer it. Yeah.
I think some people. I mean, I'm not saying this about any particular person, but I genuinely think some people just don't like women that much. Like, I know that sounds harsh, but
Effectively, they
yeah,
are just sexist. Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think, and I think that is common. You know, I've
Yeah.
definitely dealt with that within my time. You know, I try and steer off the internet as much as possible, to be
Yeah.
honest. But you
Of
certainly
course.
see some comments where you're like, yeah. And I think that the word hate is thrown around quite lightly sometimes. You know, people say they hate Marmite, or they hate this, or they hate that. You
Yeah.
know, I'm not,
Sure.
but it's
I understand what you
somewhat
mean.
normalized. I think somebody said there male fragility. I think that is probably another thing that relates to it. You know, some people probably can't stand seeing women in positions
Succeeding.
of
Yeah.
succeeding positions like that. And also, some people just can't keep their opinions to themselves in terms of, you know, you watch all the comments on Alicia Lehman and what she's like as a, you know, being sexualized and objectified,
Yeah.
and you know why that is. It's because people can't keep their opinions to themselves, and when they know that they're not gonna be any repercussions for it, and they're just happy to do it. And that's the same across so many different things. You know, it's like
Yeah.
people who abuse male footballers in the same, or racially
Because
abuse
you've got that
yeah,
veil of anonymity that social media can grant you. You know, there's no way, especially on those YouTube comments, you know, I read up there, there's no way of ever contacting those people directly. There's very little way, if anything was ever to be said in a really dark and twisted way, to ever chase them up. But there are report
oh, yeah,
buttons, but there's so much volume in terms of traffic. Actually getting any action taken on these people is very difficult.
yeah,
Alex,
and
I know that
yeah.
you've got to shoot. Final words, and
I was
I'll
just
let you
going to
go.
say, yeah, I think you know that none of them would ever turn up to a women's football game and say, "I hate you, you're terrible,"
Yeah.
or anything
Yeah.
like that. You know,
Yeah.
but it's that veil, like you say, it's the veil of the internet. It's very frustrating, and you know, luckily, you know, I've a lot of friends who are not in any way like they know I work in women's football, and not in any
Mm,
way would they ever say anything along those lines,
mm.
you know. And I really enjoy working in it. I think it gives you lots of different challenges, the same way that men's football gives you lots of different challenges, and it gives you a chance to coach at levels that I wouldn't be able to coach at in the men's game.
Yeah, it's very true at the moment. You know, it does provide that access, because whilst there is that disparity in kind of the investment, I suppose, in a good way, it can provide opportunities. But yeah, Alex, thank you so much for your time, mate. I really appreciate you having the front to jump on and have a chat about it.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. Speak to you soon and enjoy coaching. Yeah, just before I move to Leo and our next caller, I've got a couple more as well jumping up. But I've got, I think, 2 Leos actually. One of our Leos in the Discord is going to be coming on, and then another Leo, and then Wes I can see is down below as well. You're all in my queue, guys, so don't worry. The link, if you would like to have a chat about this, I don't know how long I'm going to be on for talking about this, although I'm going to have to do that classic TGT thing of plugging my laptop in again very shortly. But there was a comment in the chat that I really did quite like, and it related specifically to the sport of women's football in particular. And it was, this is really irritating because it was a really good comment. Here it is. Yeah, Alvamod, it's very simple. Why is women's football targeted? You never hear this debate about any other sport. And I think, you know, we often talk about like women in sport, but women's football in particular does get a lot of backlash, as opposed, I think, to us. Maybe it's my ignorance of not being involved in other sports enough, but I don't necessarily hear this about, you know, tennis, for instance. There is a lot of promotion for the women's side of of tennis. Of course, there's huge personalities in tennis on the women's side of things. So it's interesting. Is it something to do with the culture of football in particular? I'd be curious about that. Let's bring Leo into the conversation. Leo, how you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Oh, yeah, very good. Yeah.
Did I shock you by bringing you on then? Oh, you've got someone in the room. I know what's happened there.
No, my mother just came home. Yeah, maybe she gets to chat in about
timing. It's all good, mate. Are we good to go? Good to chat?
Perfect timing. Yeah, all good.
All good, all good. So yeah, you've obviously heard what Alex said. You've heard I've opened the show. What is it that you were passionate enough to come on and talk about?
I was passionate enough to come and just help you guys out because I've seen some phone-in shows that didn't have many people on, so I decided that I might be important. But nah, and there's many people in the queue now. And no, I think it's a very touchy topic. So if I can just bring a little bit of rationality and maybe I don't know, level ground, maybe that's helpful for somebody. So first of all, I think it's very important.
I interrupted you. Keep going.
I think it's very important. My internet's maybe not very good, but
it's fine. I can hear you perfectly. Just keep going, and I'll let you know if there's any issues.
Okay, so I think it's very important for many people to understand that you are not coming after them just because they don't like women's football. Agreed. I think it's very easy to misunderstand somebody on the internet because, well, obviously you cannot always understand what they're saying. And I myself am not the biggest women's football fan. I don't watch every game. I barely watched any games. I think maybe one or two. But yeah, I think you need to be quite an interesting person to take your time and tell somebody to not talk about it or to not to like it. I think there's definitely something shady going on there. And
what when you say something shady, do you think it stems from like because I think from like the point, from my opinion is that if you're taking the time out your day to really put forward the point to tell me, for instance, doing the show, stop covering women's football, I think that comes from a point of misogyny, personally.
Yes. You don't see people not liking you talk about the under-18s team's result, right?
Exactly.
And and there is an argument that the women's football's quality is not as high as the men's team due to physicality, due to
lack the fact that women haven't been allowed to play football for decades compared to the men's team.
80 years. Yeah, absolutely. So if the performance and the quality of the football is the only problem, then surely you hate the under-21s teams and you hate the other teams surely you hate, I don't know, La Liga because, I don't know, Girona doesn't play as good as Manchester United.
Is the suggestion, sure.
Yeah, raise your standards, people.
Yeah. The classic saying of raise your standards. Yeah. No, I think you're right, Leo. I think that it's and I think that in the analogy it works. I think it's one that I'm cautious about because obviously, I use the example of like the Sunday League example. I think some people might very quickly turn around and say, "Oh, see, you're trying to compare the women's game to Sunday League," and it's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. The point is, it's about that hatred side of things. It's about if you perceive something to be of a lower standard, I don't think that is need enough to say that you hate it. I think that's the issue there. Leo, just have a final words because I think we are getting some connectivity issues, and then we'll move on. But a final word on your side of things.
Be kind, people. Like, you don't like women's football, don't watch it. Like the shows, and I think this is a defense mechanism in the culture, and especially on the internet right now, because of this whole everything is tending to be over dramatized and over simplified.
Yeah.
So if you could just look at things rationally and level-headedly, I think it's a lot easier to stop hating things.
Yeah. Indeed. I think you really well, Leo. So much for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, let's bring we'll swap one Leo out for another. Let's bring other Leo into the conversation. How you doing, mate? You good, you well?
Yeah, I'm fine. Caught that by a little bit by accident. I just saw that you did a phone-in show about women's football, and I was like, yes, my topic.
Is it your tell me why it's your topic, mate? You're clearly
I'm a football coach since now 12 years. And I have trained as well women girls teams as well as boys teams.
Yeah.
I have 2 little nieces that play football actively.
Amazing.
And I'm a sociology student.
Oh, really?
I have
Interesting.
natural
No pressure on you
exposure.
being an expert then on this.
Oh boy. Nah, I think firstly I want to congratulate the other Leo on his last words. I think that's something to live by. Just be kind to other people and treat others like you want to be treated, and the world will be a better place for it.
Indeed.
But speaking on the topic itself, I think there are much similarities to the discussions about women's football, to discussions about everything that's changing in the past like 25 years. With one topic I like to take is veganism. Like people start deciding they don't want to eat meat anymore, and somehow people that eat meat get offended by that.
Right.
It's the same thing with women's football. Women decided, in parentheses, they want to start playing football professionally, and men that don't play with them, don't have to watch it, don't have any exposure to it.
Don't have to have any opinion on it whatsoever. Yeah.
Exactly. And they get offended simply by the fact that people do something different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good example. I think in the example of saying of using the veganism example, that someone chooses to be vegan and they do that of their own accord. It's why then other people have to have an opinion to say, X, Y, Z. I agree with you. I think it's important. I mean, from the sociological side, as you were talking about it, maybe it's more psychology than sociology, but it's trying to get into the headspace of why there is an offence. Like why, when I would talk about Arsenal winning 3-1 at the weekend against it. Right. So I'll give you a good example. Sometimes I don't even say Arsenal women. I just say Arsenal. So I'll say at the weekend, Arsenal beat Villa 3-1 and Stina Blackstenius scored, which I think is enough information for people to recognise that I am talking about the women's game because A, Arsenal men's haven't played this weekend. B, I've mentioned Stina Blackstenius, and C, I've mentioned the team that they're playing, who we have, already played away from home on the men's side this season. And yet I get people in my comments saying, Tom, can you make sure you call them the Arsenal women rather than just Arsenal because we need to differentiate? I'm like, I've given you a lot of information there, 3 bits of information that very clearly differentiate it without labelling it Arsenal women. Why are you so desperate for me to call it Arsenal women? Why do you think that desperation exists, Leo?
Firstly, I don't think you need to make a distinction. I mean, Arsenal Football Club is Arsenal Football Club. If you talk about the under 8s, under 12s, women, men, or the seniors over 40s that play for Arsenal, it's Arsenal Football Club. And if your offense starts at the part that you don't make a distinction between women Arsenal and men Arsenal, then that's the root of your issue. If you have to make a gender-based distinction, how you consume your content, then buddy, you have lots of problems, my friend. I think speaking from my experience in sociology, English is not my English language, I'm so sorry, that the current modern time is characterized by lots and lots and lots of changes that happen very fast. There is one statistic a professor quoted to me, is that the knowledge of the world doubles every 5 to 7 years at the moment. So the entire knowledge, all the knowledge we have amassed, doubles at the moment every 5 to 7 years. And with that change, with that acceleration of information and development, many people get simply scared. They get overwhelmed. They don't know what to do with it. And especially people, let's call them the boomer generation for no reason at all.
What is the boomer generation? What decades would that be?
They are like in their late 40s to early 60s now.
Start date 1946, end date 1964. So 60s to 80s, is that, I guess?
It's a very dominant generation that holds much political power at the moment, because that's the age for it. But in general, the thing is, people tend to get scared of things they don't understand. So it's the same thing with the inclusive speech debate we have here in Germany. It's the same thing with legalizing marijuana. It's the same thing with women's football, veganism, free access to women's hygiene products in toilets. That's a huge discussion here in Germany.
Really?
Yeah, because the thing is, people tend to develop the feeling that if someone gets something, I get something taken away from me. Why does
Right,
he get something for free and I don't get something?
I see. Yeah.
So, and that's the offense some people take, and maybe there's some disgruntled people that didn't make it in football that are just envious because women now have it so much easier. They have so much.
Right.
They get everything shoved their way. Which I would.
I'd say they have it much less. It's less of a challenge than it was.
Yes,
not
exactly.
to correct you, but I feel like when we say things like it's much easier, it's still a hell of a challenge. Like, it's still
Absolutely.
a massive challenge, isn't it? Yeah.
And as someone that envies how England is at the moment handling their professional women's league, because in Germany we used to be on top of it. We used to be the best in women's football in the 2000s, and we just miss professionalizing it. We have in the German women's football league, we have 2.5 professional teams:
Wolfsburg,
Bavaria Munich, and Turbine Potsdam, maybe.
Okay.
And that means most teams, even in the first league, the players that play there aren't full-time professional footballers. Some of them have to work next to playing professional football, which is completely crazy. And yeah, I just think that this sentiment with things changing and not understanding, and that's being scary, combined with maybe the disgruntlement of it's so easy, the football is so bad, the standard is so low, which all is completely crap.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's about context, isn't it? But I mean, if we're honest, I think the people that turn around and said the standard's terrible, just people that don't really watch it.
Yes.
Mainly, or they're doing direct comparisons with the sport on the men's side that's had investment for decades and decades and decades into it, more millions and billions spent on it more than on the women's side has. Well, obviously there's going to be a difference, in the quality, and it's about how we promote to try and equalize things as much as we can, So it's I'm conscious of the time, so I've got 2 more guests I want to get on. So just a final comment from yourself, just to wrap things off.
Maybe if you want to compare both sports, I think the men's game is more physical, it's faster, so if you enjoy that, watch that. But I think in many ways, especially in England, the women's game is technically more proficient at the moment. There is so if you like the technical aspect of football, the ball handling and stuff like that, maybe give women's football a try. Maybe give it a try.
I think that's the biggest message that I'd love to come out from this. The 2 biggest things I'd love to come out from this show is A, people just think a bit more before leaving the comments that you've seen today, and B, it might even encourage people to check it out, and to give it a bit more of a chance. Leo, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and the insight that you provided as well. It was excellent.
Bye.
Thank you. Got a couple more guests. There are still some phone lines open. We've got maybe a little bit of a wait, but if you are quick in getting on, you will do. The link is in the chat. Wes is up next. Wes, how you doing, mate? It's always a pleasure to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great, Tom. Good afternoon. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Caught you on your lunch break, I see.
Yeah. No, it's really good timing. I'm out here on the West Coast, so 8 hours back. Hey, I'm gonna sidetrack you just real quick. Did you catch the Tyler Adams strike last night versus Mexico?
Yes, I did. Top left-hand corner, absolute screamer.
Thing of you.
Brilliant goal.
Brilliant. Joe should have done better, but I'll take it.
Indeed. So, what was it about this topic that tweaked your interest?
So, in my civilian world, I'm actually a communications manager and for a local nonprofit, and I think a lot of it comes down to that there absolutely are some people who are misogynistic, and you should block them. Now, that's up to you.
Sure.
But aspect that people need to understand that when you type in a comment in a DM or whatever, there's wording that could easily be taken and skewed into a manner which you did not initially intend it. So, for instance, Tom, if I were to come in and tell you, "Hey, Tom, I love your show. I would really prefer this kind of content," I'm sure that would encourage a very positive response from you, or at least a, "Hey, yep, no, that's great. I'll take it into consideration." But when you do come on and say, "Hey, I really don't like this content. I don't want you to do it anymore." Well, okay, there could be a couple of reasons for that. There could be the non-misogynistic way of, "Hey, I really do just want you to do this other stuff. I just said it in a less nice way." Or it could be, "Yep, I'm actually a misogynist. I don't want you to do that content and I hate it." And absolutely, that should get the response from you that you've shown. And
how
I think
do I know the difference, Wes?
Yeah.
How can I tell the difference? So if
you can't.
I can't.
You can't.
Okay. So it's saying I'm never going to be able to tell.
And that's just
okay.
it. I mean, you as the content creator, you have to approach that into a very measured and neutral response. And you can say, hey, listen, if you're suggesting content, or if you're suggesting I don't do content, well, your opinion is noted. This is my channel. Here's what I'm going to do. And if you don't like it, feel free to move on to other things. And then if you continue to come back to that same person, well, then that's on them. And then you can say, hey, listen, I took it. This is the way I'm doing it. If you don't like it, there's the door. And people need to be mature enough. And I think that's part of the problem too. People need to be mature enough to understand that it is your channel and you can talk about the things you want to talk about. And after you after you say, hey, I'd rather like to hear this stuff, but then you keep doing your show, then that's it. And people need to understand that and respect that. And I think that's where, again, the trolls aside and the misogynists aside, that's where a lot of the debate is going to result to. And unfortunately, when you come out with your response, there could be some collateral damage that you didn't intend, and that's where your current debate is. And it's unfortunate.
I think in the state, they're not even intent. I think is obviously just some people are going to misinterpret your own messaging. There's always a chance that someone's going to misinterpret. When I turn around to people and say that, I think that if you're publicizing your disinterest in women's football, that makes you a misogynist. And I think that personally, there is some misogyny behind publicly, without being, triggered, without there being a trigger and just spontaneously wanting to spout a dislike or disinterest in women's football, there is a basis of misogyny there, in my opinion. If I cover women's football, there is obviously the trigger. That is the trigger in this case. So the person that left the comment this morning on the show saying, stop talking about women's football, basically, for me, I think there's some misogyny there, but I'm wanting to have a conversation about it. I'm wanting to talk about it. I wanted to explain to someone, well, I put in place a lot of measures so that you don't actually have to listen to the bits you're not interested in. YouTube itself provides tools that means you don't have to listen to it. There's a fast forward button. I put in chapters into the first part of the show, so you can always click through which parts of the show you do and do not want to listen to. It's the part of which, and I actually really appreciate you calling in ways to try and provide different, and trying to make me think a bit harder about this as well. But there's something about someone telling me, not specifically and directly, stop talking about women's football, that I think I have a right to take a bit of an issue with.
You do. No, and 100%. When someone is telling you what to do with your channel, that's them imposing trying to impose.
By the way, I want to be 100% clear on this. I'm not taking an issue with them telling me what to do. If someone wants to tell me what they do and don't like about their channel, I have absolutely no problem with that at all. Yeah. It is this specific topic, and it would be the same for if we were talking about race, if we were talking about religion, if we were talking about these, these points of debate. It is this specific thing when someone says, stop talking about women's football. Or when we tackle the racism issue in football, which is a continually, and I personally think a frustratingly growing problem when it should really be going in the other direction. And it's people saying, stop talking about, or keep politics out of football is another thing you often see spoken. I hate that phrase because I'm sorry, but football and politics are socially, economically intertwined and will never be taken apart. They're just so influential upon one another. So yeah, I have that clear issue with someone saying it about this topic in particular. I know I went off on a bit there, but you get where I'm going from.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And again, I think there's a certain kind of mutual respect on that. And if people who are watching your show don't understand the way you do things after a couple of shows, and they still continue to come on here and be like, hey, don't stop talking about that. And we're like, okay, well, you've now crossed the line. If you don't like the show, do your own. There's a spot, and then you'll get whatever followership you get. And it's just that mutual respect that people don't understand. And of course, there probably is some, like you said, some deep-rooted misogyny in there, and maybe they're just not aware of that, or maybe they're just not choosing their words correctly to get across a point. So again, it's all about that line. And then you're put into a very difficult spot as the host, so where you have to decipher this DM, which is what, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 words. And you have to try to imply or figure out exactly what they mean inside of those words. Well, again, that's an impossible spot for you. So I think you've absolutely gone out of your way to put out there what your show's about, what you cover, how you cover it, And if you don't like it, no one's forcing you to watch. So at that point, I think it would help your health and your blood pressure to just say, hey, listen, your opinion's noted. Thanks for your comment. There's the door.
Yeah. Whereas you've made me think a bit harder. No, don't apologize, please. You've made me think harder about this, definitely, and you've sparked some thoughts in my mind. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for doing your show, Tom. I appreciate it. I watch it every day. I love it.
Thanks, man. Enjoy the rest of your work day. I'm sure it'll go swiftly.
Cheers, Tom. You too. Have a good one.
Yeah, it's really important. I want to raise this point here. Chris says again, I want to really hammer home this point. Chris says, but what about people that don't like watching women's football? In brackets, not me, by the way. It doesn't automatically mean they're misogynistic. It's just a preference. I really do want to just hammer this point home. Chris is right. Like, there is nothing wrong with people that don't particularly like women's football, have no interest in women's football. You are allowed to not like it. You are allowed to have a preference. That doesn't make you misogynistic at all. The point of this show, again, is to highlight the fact that for those that have such an issue with it, that it is a desperation to publicize it, to tell people like myself who cover it to stop covering it, that's where that line gets crossed. So again, just to really hammer that point home. Let's bring in Innie, I believe, to the conversation. Innie, how you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, hi Tom, how you doing? Big fan of the show.
I'm doing good, mate. There's a little bit of wind I can hear in the background.
Okay, sorry. I'm outside.
Hear you clearly enough, so I think you'll be fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So, like I said, I obviously coached a women's side, or I was a goalkeeper coach for a women's side a couple of seasons ago.
Excellent.
And the standard is improving. I was actually pleasantly surprised because I came with some prejudice about it myself.
Yeah.
But one of my old coaches came up to me and said, "Innie, you're my goalkeeper. Do you want to help me train the girls?" I was sort of like, not too sure, but I went there and I was pleasantly surprised. Obviously, the power is not there, but the technique is definitely there, and over time, I think the standards will improve and stuff.
It's teachable.
And what
that technical element is teachable, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things I would say, people have the right not to like women's football. I get that, but to publicize it, say that you hate it, I think, what's the point in doing that? So it's like me. If someone says, let's say someone has a preference, they don't want to date certain races. Okay, that's one thing. But to publicize it, I'm like, why do you need to do that at the same time? I've always found that a little bit weird and stuff. But this is only an opinion and stuff, and this may counteract what I've just said. Do you believe that the dimensions of the women's game should change? What I mean is like the goal size and the football pitch size. Is that something? Because obviously when is that something?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So basically, what you're saying, they're playing a sport to the men's what's the right word? Environment, I guess.
Yes.
It's a really good question, actually.
Because that's one of the things they say. Because one of the things they say, because you got to remember the average man and the average woman is totally different. But why are the goals, men's goals basically, with the average woman and men are different?
For instance. When I go play a round of golf, any excuse to bring up a round of golf on this show, I'll try and take. But there are obviously the women's tees and the men's tees that you have, right? Because on average, women drive a golf ball shorter than the average man will drive a golf ball. So, I think it's a really interesting question. I think that the issue there that is created is that if we want to promote women's football as much as feasibly possible and get big crowds, they're going to have to play on the men's pitches, because obviously the big stadiums.
But you could change them though. You could change the dimensions before the games. It wouldn't be like
you repaint the lines, I guess.
You repaint the lines and you do the goals a bit.
You've bowled me. Absolutely, that's a really good response. You could just simply paint the lines differently. I mean,
it's only a suggestion, because one of the things that it could ask, because obviously when I looked at the average, because I'm 6'2", so obviously I look imposing on the goal. And the goalkeepers I was training, average was 5'7", 5'6", and you can kind of tell a lot of goals could come, and sometimes that kind of adds to, which is not really fair. It's like basically judging a kids game to an adults game, because if you put under 12 goalkeeper, even the boys in the men's goal, it just looks amateurish. You see, it's just a suggestion. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong.
I think you absolutely raise a really good question. Should the what's the word? It's not the
dimensions.
Dimensions. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Thank you, Innie. Dimensions, should they change to help in some ways, because you're right, like, you know, on average women are shorter than men, and so
another thing is also the injuries as well, because another thing I saw was like a lot of women were getting certain injuries all the time. So is the football boots even designed that way?
So is there enough research being done into football boots?
Yeah, because there has been a lot of injuries. As you know, there's a lot of injuries happen.
Yeah, and knee injuries in particular have been really on the rise. Yeah.
So it's something. It's worth it. And maybe if we, obviously, this will take time after development, and maybe the next 20 years or so, they'll realize, oh, this needs to be in place, so it'll prevent, and that increases the quality and stuff as well. And also another thing about the women's game as well. I have a little one. He's 18 months old. Obviously, he's a boy. But if I was going to take him to a game, I'll probably take him to a women's game. I'll take him to a men's game, because I'll be quite scared with all the swearing and the cursing and stuff. I always found the women's game is more family friendly and stuff. So that's one of the things I wanted to add.
And I think you're right. When I was younger, my mum took me to watch an England women's game a couple of times at Priestfield, which is where Gillingham play. That was when obviously the women's game was nowhere near as big as it was now. So they were playing in League Two, you know, stadiums rather than Wembley, for instance. So and it was because they felt safer bringing young kids to those types of games. So I think you raised you've raised some fantastic points, mate.
Thank you.
Honestly, doing this show, and I mean this very sincerely, doing this show was worth it just to hear your opinions on this show. It was fantastic.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Keep up the good work. And like I said to anyone, if you don't like the women's bit, just skip it. No one's forcing you to listen to it. At the end of the day, no one can tell you how to do your show. At the end of the day, it's you that pays the bills. It's you that pays for the internet connection. So no one has any right to tell you what to do, unless they are a premium member or a board member. Right. Then they could suggest something, but they can't demand anything.
Which I'm open to. I'm welcome to. I welcome feedback, as long as it's coming from a constructive and positive place. Yeah. Innie, thank you so much, mate. Really a pleasure.
No, you too, brother. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Lovely stuff. Brilliant guest, Innie. Make sure you're showing plenty of love. As with all of our guests on the show so far, we've got some more callers we're going to bring on. Kay has been very patiently waiting and is up next. Kay, how you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Hey, Tom. Not too bad. How about yourself?
Yeah, that looks like the coziest jacket I've ever seen.
Mate, I've heard that before, and it is.
It just looks incredibly cozy. I'm very jealous.
I look like I'm about to go into an Eskimo.
Talk to me, mate. What's perked your interest about this topic?
Well, I mean, I live locally. I live in Holloway. I've been going to the Arsenal my whole life. And I was a convert. I'm a convert. So I'm calling to tell you that, you know, I wasn't very pro. I was an anti to start off with. I was neutral.
Yeah.
But my life is Arsenal. I love the Arsenal more than I love anything. And it just, for me, it was like, well, if there's an under 21 game, I'm going. If there's an under 18 game, I'm going. And if there's a women game, I'm going. So I started going. I just picked myself up and I started going to games. And the atmosphere is lovely. It's so fun. It's so friendly. I mean, Innie was talking about taking your child. So many children, so much sort of good, positive vibes. The chants are nice. It feels like Arsenal, but it's not Arsenal. It's more like sort of like an entry-level Arsenal almost. And it's pleasant. The football is really improved a lot. I mean, I've seen it improve. I've been going to sort of home games now for about 3 years now. Here at the Emirates, because I live just near the Emirates. I haven't been to Meadow Park yet. I want to go. And yeah, I'm just here to call to say, look, I am somebody who gave it a chance. I started off not really, you know, I didn't have any preconceptions. I just went in and I wanted to watch a game of football. If you're walking by and you see a game of football, you stop. And if they're wearing Arsenal shirts, you're going to stop even more. You're going to want to know what's going on. And if they're fighting for the badge and, you know, they're looking to win things for the Arsenal, why would you not be, you know, for that? And we've got a strong team. Our team is good. You know, we've got an academy that's producing talent. You know, when you look at Lotte Wubben-Moy, that's talent that's coming through the academy. We've got fighters. We've got Katie McCabe who fights for the team more than many who wore the men's shirt. So I find it very hard to kind of stand by and look at people bad mouthing the Arsenal, because for me that's the Arsenal. If you're saying I don't want to, you know, you to talk about the women's game, then you're basically saying I don't want you to talk about a part of the Arsenal. And for me that's a problem. Like, it's all a family. We're all a family. Everything Arsenal is a family, whether it's Hayland or whether it's the women's or the men's. We should stand behind it. They're fighting for the cannon, and there's no reason why you should oppose that. You could say I might not show a lot of interest for whatever reason, But actively going and spreading negativity is just not called for, and that's why I called.
Yeah, no, I think you've summed it up really well. You summed it up better than I even could, mate. It is that. I think Ian Wright used the term first, was like, when you support Arsenal, you support all of it. And I think that message stood really importantly. And the fact that annoyed some people, you know, and really got that response in such a negative manner was so frustrating. So I think, yeah, that I love that you started off that comment where you said at first you were kind of neutral to it. You weren't necessarily anti it, not at all, but you were neutral to it, very much more skewed towards the men's side, because I'm assuming that's probably what you grew up watching the most of, right? Because you had more access, more exposure to it. And eventually you've kind of, you know, it's grown. And so your love of the Arsenal has bled into the academy and obviously the women's side as well. And it's that I just wish, Kay, that more people were like yourself and had that openness to just appreciate. And it's again, it's not, I don't want this show to come across as kind of like this finger pointing, you must go watch women's. This is not what that is about at all. It is purely about the, I suppose, the making it real to people that say, like, the distraction that people want to take away from the women's game is where there's a problem, you know.
Yes.
The point of like,
it's that they get annoyed when you bring it up. It's almost as if you are
like this comment from this morning show. No women football.
That's this morning show. Yeah, and
yes. Sorry, continue.
Arsenal, leave it. Yeah, go for it. No, go for it.
No. I was done.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. It's just the sort of trying to bring it down. It's actively trying to weigh it down, and you're trying to actively sort of. Some people even insinuate that it's taking money even away from the first team, because the first team is being invested. The women is being invested in by the club, and I'm like, but it's the club. It's Arsenal. If Arsenal go on to win the league, and we're not going, because this season's been tough, but you know, we're out of the Champions League this year. We've had a difficult year. That's all right. But that's the journey we go on as supporters, and it's part of the journey. And you know, if you sit around and follow the Arsenal, you're probably looking at what's happening on the under 18s. You're looking at what's happening on the under 21s. You're looking at what's happening across the landscape, and you are definitely going to have to look at what's happening on the women's side. Otherwise, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle, and you never really understand what's happening with the club, because the club is moving forward, and part of moving forward is growing the global appeal of the club. And growing the global appeal of the club means growing everybody. It's about being inclusive and including everybody. Women are a big part of the game. And, you know, I'm actually shocked we're having this conversation in this day and age, because I think this conversation we could have had 4 years ago, you know.
I'm really not shocked.
England's won the Euros. You know, what are we talking about? Like, I
know what you're saying, but because I just see it on such a daily basis now. Social media,
I agree, yeah.
You just seeing it such a regularity. It's really...
But you still have to keep it's almost like we're almost taking a few steps back, but we have to, as you said, so that we can continue to drive home the message, because, you know, this isn't something that, you know, we could just say, oh, well, you know, it's happening in our world. This is a part of, and if we are to fight toxicity in the fan base around certain topics, because we've had toxicity on a number of topics, not just the women issue, this is the same as a number of issues. And if we are to have a stance on these issues, having the stance on the women issue is just as important to all of us Gooners. And you know, I encourage everybody who's been sort of neutral or is like, you know, interested, or, you know, go for it. You know, watch it on the TV, put it on. It's not normally on the hours where the men's game is playing most of the time. Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap, but all right, we're not saying watch those, but you know,
to work on that. That's certainly something. The amount of times I've seen an Arsenal women's game at the same time as the men's game, and you're like,
this weekend as well. What? There's an overlap. Yeah,
it's certainly something that needs looking at. Kay, absolute pleasure, my friend, and I hope
no problem, Tom.
A future show.
Happy to come on. Have a lovely one. Bye.
Have a fantastic evening. Massive thank you to Kay. Let's bring on our next caller. Thank you first of all to Albert and Cesar, who have allowed our next guest to jump ahead because they have got a time constraint. Let's bring in Lila to the conversation. Lila, how are you doing?
I'm good, Tom. How are you?
Very good. Where are you joining me from?
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Oh, so you've got the club coming to you this summer, right?
Yeah, I'm really excited. Me and my brothers are actually
ticket prices.
Yeah, I know, but it might be worth it. It's like me and my brother are huge fans, so we're hoping to be able to come and see them when they're here.
Amazing.
I'm really excited.
I hope you have a fantastic time.
Yeah.
Tell me what you'd like to discuss.
Well, I just wanted to say, because I saw a few people in chat being like, "Oh, it'd be great to like hear a woman on this." And
I was hoping it would happen.
I was like, it's a lot of men discussing a women's issue, which is totally fine, and everybody's been super supportive and wonderful. So it's been like great to hear. But I just wanted to say and add, like, from the perspective of a woman who loves sports, who grew up playing sports, who like loves Arsenal more than I can really express, like. I don't watch the women's game. I don't really pay attention to it. I think it's awesome, and I will watch it if it's on. But like the Women's World Cup this year, and getting to watch like stadiums full of people, regardless of gender and regardless of where they were from, cheering on like women playing a game. I just think it's something that is like so valuable and so special, and like really meant so much to me just on like a human personal level as a woman in a world where like it's not always super easy to be a woman. I think that just like the power that has is just something that's like, why would you want to hate on that? Like, why would you want to come in and be like, don't talk about this? Like, you know how many like podcasts there are that are centered around women's football? Because it's not very many compared to how many there are about men's football. And it's like, I love the club. I love the sport. I love to hear about news, whether it's international, whether it's women's, whether it's youth. I'm just interested to learn more. So I feel like it's not misogynistic to not watch women's football, but it does become like at least influenced by misogyny when you come on and say like, I don't like the sport, or the sport is not good, or don't talk about the sport. So I just wanted to bring in the aspect of like, from a human, like personal perspective, it's really important to me that the women's game is getting bigger and getting better, and that people like you are like advocating for it, because it stretches like beyond sports into just people and loving one another. So that's
and I'm really glad you called in, Lila, because obviously, you know, naturally, I think the metrics of the channel's audience are something like 99% male to 1% female. So I knew it was always going to be a challenge, you know, in hoping that a woman would come on the show. So I'm so glad that you did. And I think I'm never going to understand, you know, football in the same way that you do, because you will have faced challenges that I will never face. I don't mean that in a patronizing way at all. I just won't. And I'm curious, have you experienced, like, what challenges have you experienced from being a woman in the football space, especially from, I mean, how active are you in kind of the social feeds and things like that to experience it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just stems from like being younger and playing the sport. Like it just was not a very open place, especially like as I was growing up. Like things have gotten so much better in the past 10 to 15 years, but like the amount of times I heard growing up, like just people saying really horrible things about female athletes, about female sport, about like it will never be something that people care about. Those things like you kind of internalize, and you don't, I think, realize it like necessary. I mean, I don't understand what it's like to be a man and to grow up as a man, but I feel like getting constant positive, like we love watching these men play, and we love our boys, and we love our lads. It's like, oh wow, like people are so excited to see these guys play. It's like I just had the opposite messaging my whole life. Like, oh, nobody cares. You'll never be as good as me. You'll never be as fast as me. Like, no matter how hard you work, you are not as good as me, is kind of the messaging. And I see the kind of stuff on social media too. Like I try not to read the comments, but like any single post of the Arsenal, you know, Instagram where it's like a women specific post, it's like you'd be hard pressed not to see at least one, if not many more comments saying like, I don't care, you know, like at all.
I think you can
about
guarantee
this.
it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, it just gets so boring and so tiring. Like what a boring opinion to have. Like yours. Like if oh sorry, my AirPod just died.
That's okay.
Anyway, point being is just like, if you don't care about women's football, that's fine. Like keep it to yourself, because basically no one cares, and it's just like, I just don't really see what it's adding, you know? Like I think you add a lot to the discussion by supporting and promoting and furthering the game, and somebody who's coming in just to say I don't like this sport is really contributing nothing. And I just think at the end of the day, it's like I personally wouldn't take my time out of the day to be like hating on something, but
some people do though. They're pretty bored. Is what I always think.
Seemingly, they have a lot of time.
Indeed, too much. Lila, I know you've got to shoot because you've got a time constraint. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I really do appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks, Lila. Enjoy the tour in the summer.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
See you later. Bye. Massive thank you to Lila. Please show plenty of love in the chat box. Our next caller is Albert, and then Says is up after that. Albert, good friend of the show. I've never seen this man before in my life. How are you? You good?
Yeah, not bad, man. I was just browsing through socials, and I see Tom was going to do a stream, and been obviously watching the comment section go through. Yeah, it's a very interesting talking point, to say the least, mate.
Yeah, and I've actually been surprised at the reaction. Not only is there over 600 people watching the show, which in itself is great, because I used to do morning shows that didn't get that many views. So the fact that this topic is attracting attention, not only attracting attention, I think it's one thing to do a show, people dip in, see what it's about, and then go, oh, not for me. I think the fact that it's retaining your listenership, by the way, viewers, is great and really encouraging. So yeah, Albert, I know you do plenty of watching and talking and attending of women's football. So I guess it must be pretty frustrating when you see this stuff.
Oh, Tom, I do a lot of talking, as you know. You know what it is with the women's football. I've always been very open about. I'm sort of I've watched the international side of women's football for a long time, like going back, probably secondary school days, to be honest with you. But let me give it a context. So Hope Powell was the England manager for about 13 years. I remember when she was playing. So that shows you how far. I'm talking about the names of Katie Chapman, Marion Spacey, Faye White. That's a long time ago. So sort of from the Arsenal side of it, Tom, I was pretty late into it, if I'm going to be honest. But the women's international side of it, I've always been keen with the England side, and I just love tournament football, men and women. So when I saw your post, I watch your show in the morning time when I can sort of get to it. And I do see some of the bits, even for the segment, the very, very small segment you cover for the women's game. And you see the traction that you get, and you're like, wow. This is there's part of me I'm not surprised, Tom, if I'm honest. One of your members raised a very, very good point. And I was thinking it when I was watching it, that football seems to be one of the last sports, if not the only sport, where it triggers men rotten.
Some
like men. Some. Let me say that keyword. Some people start getting on my case. But,
I'm here for you, man.
Yeah.
I'll catch you.
But it is. There's something about football, where it just rears its ugly head, and we know what social media is like, man. It's I think, Tom, from another point of view as well, actually, which now for those who are on Twitter, for example, and I'd say particularly for the last 4 years I've been on it in terms of the YouTube side of it.
Yeah.
I think my biggest gripe, and anybody that's on the Twitter space, is we have YouTube content creators that cover women's football for completely the wrong reasons. And that winds me up rotten. People that are on the Twitter space will know who I'm talking about. I don't need to mention names because it's obvious.
Sure. Yeah,
because their particular view. So their particular views about women generally isn't really great. So why you'd be covering the women's football? We know why you're doing it, and that's just the most disingenuous thing to do. That's what winds me up the most, if anything. But it comes back to what a lot of your people have said, Tom, in terms of I think Alex first came on. And people probably said in the chat, if you don't like something, and this goes for most things, then you don't watch it. I mean, there's certain reality TV programs I watch, right? People will be horrified that I watch them, Tom, but I do. But you don't have to watch it.
Yeah.
Like you said, you made such a key point.
The amount of times I was judged for watching like reality TV shows, it's like menial as that.
Yeah.
It's
And you make such a good point about the chapter thing, right? Because particularly your show and probably many other YouTube content creators out there, they do shows with chapters, so you know what's coming.
Yeah.
And what is the problem about talking about the Arsenal women? This is insane.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even. I mean, Tom, the mad thing as well is, I don't know how many fathers have got daughters that watch your channel. I mean, God forbid if their daughters ever want to play football. I mean, I don't know what they're going to think then. They don't have to take them to watch it.
Yeah.
Unbelievably. So, I mean, it comes back to what I said, man. Like, if you don't want to watch it, then don't watch it. But like you talk about the word misogyny, and I hate it. I don't like it. I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like I've never seen anything like it.
I know. I have been. I've been aware of its existence, but obviously since doing this 8 a.m. show and since because at the start I didn't incorporate the women's side when I first. I mean, we've done what 900 8 a.m. episodes now, but I remember like way back at the start, I didn't address the women's game. And for those, by the way, that are tuning in and saying I've tuned in late, what are we talking about? Just for a bit of context, obviously this was one of the comments left on this morning's show, and if you rewind to the start of the show, you'll see some more of the comments that have been coming up throughout the day, and it's really sparked this desire in me to want to talk about it. If you want to go to my Twitter as well, at the Gooner Talk TV, I also tweeted about it to get some more context for you. But yeah, I obviously I didn't incorporate it at the start. I was focusing on the men's game, and ostensibly, I'm still, I'd say 95% of what I cover, what I do, what I write about in my job is the men's side of things. My interest in the women's game has gone up massively. I'd say to go from 0% where it used to be to 5% is a big jump for me, and it would be for a lot of other people. And there is a time aspect, because there is only so many hours in the day as well for people, and so people will only watch as much as they can watch, and committing to 2 weekend games, potentially 4 a week, potentially 5 a week, depending on how many midweek games there can be sometimes. I absolutely empathize with people who say that I don't have the time. I don't have the time to commit to watching the women's side. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And you shouldn't feel bad, by the way, about that, but you should absolutely, at the very minimum, want them to succeed. That should be the minimum expectation as any fan, is that you want them to succeed. And that's when people say, like, I don't care about it. And I say to them, okay, tomorrow, Arsenal women are playing Spurs women. And if they win, they'll win the WSL title. I tell you what, it would take someone really cold to turn to me and say, I couldn't, I don't care if Spurs won that. Because what Arsenal fan, forget about the football inside, what Arsenal fan would ever, in any context, be wanting to see that? And so that's where I start to think that it crosses over from just disinterest into those words we saw with some of those comments at the start of the show, where people are using words like hatred and genuine really dislike for it, which is spawned from what I believe to be misogyny. So
because the thing is, Tom, like, it's like I said before, like I love football obviously, but I like a lot of sport, and I watch a lot of women's sport, particularly with golf, tennis, cricket. There's loads of different sports, and I don't see anything like this. There's something about football, and I think you asked Alex the question at the start. Like, what is it? And he just said, I just think some men they just don't like women very much.
Yeah, I think
and if you combine that with football and how love football is, it just snowballs even more. It
becomes an ownership thing.
Yeah,
it's like, this is ours. Football is for men. It's not for anyone else. I think that's where it will spawn from for some. Very sadly. Indeed. 100%. Albert, it's been a pleasure. Any final comments you'd like to make before I move on to my next guest?
Any final comments? Yes. In terms of the women's Euros, I will be covering that because, like I said, I love tournament football, and the standard, which has been talking about a lot, has improved massively. I think the World Cup highlighted that. Some of the games were incredible. They were incredible to watch. So when the standard gets better, you might have a few less detractors, like your previous call. Was it the guy that lived in Holloway? He said he won. Yeah. That's a great call, fantastic call. That's exactly the kind of call that was good for this segment of the show that you're doing. So keep up the good work, Tom, and don't let the haters don't let them bother you too much.
No, of course, mate. No, I appreciate you jumping in as always. Nice to speak with you. And make sure, if you're not already subscribed to Albert J TV, people, make sure you go and do that.
We'll talk soon, Tom.
Talk soon, man. See you soon.
Right, take care. Bye, mate.
Massive thanks to Albert as always. Absolute pleasure. Right, let's bring in Cesar to the conversation, who joins us live from his car. How you doing, Cesar? You good, Joel?
I'm good. How are you, Tom?
Very good. Sorry to make you wait so long, and thank you for being so patient as well. What made you want to call in today? And thank you also for letting Lila jump in as well.
Of course.
Go for it.
Before I never really had a big interest in women's sports in general, not just football, but like basketball, because I'm a huge basketball fan, and I don't really watch women's basketball, WNBA or anything like that. But at the end of the day, I decided to give it a chance because if you're gonna support Arsenal, you know, you gotta support the whole club, which is women's, the youth sides, and all that. And so I decided to give Arsenal women's a try. It was last season, and I never thought I could be, because I watched all the Champions League games for the women's side, and I never thought I could feel so down when they lost that semifinal at home. And I don't know, I decided to give it a chance, and it kind of, because I also support Mexico, the national team, so they recently ended their Copa America for the women's side, and I decided to give them a chance too, and I was really excited. I saw a lot of excitement on it too, and just, you know, I get that some people don't have an interest in women's sports, and I was in that side too. Yeah. But if you give it a chance, it's not that bad. It can give you excitement. You know, the thing is supporting the club you love. Doesn't matter if it's male or female. That's the end of it for me.
Yeah, I think spoke really, really well on that, and it's great to see, you know, that those competitions are kind of inspiring you to involve yourself much more. And like you talked about, like the WNBA and you know, other sports, and I think, you know, a few people have touched upon this, like, but it seems like football is the biggest kind of catalyst for the misogynistic side of things, more than any other women's sport that, you know, obviously has a men's and women's side to it, which is, you know, thankfully these days the majority and basically all of them. But it does seem that football is the one. Do you have any opinion as to why it is?
I think I might disagree, because I do follow I follow a lot of NBA pages too, and they
you'll follow it more than I will, so I will defer to you.
Yeah. So sometimes when they post like a joint post with WNBA and NBA, and there's a women's side of it, there's a lot of hateful comments on it too. So there's a lot of hate on the.
Matt says, "Oh no, Tom, WNBA gets horrible hatred, unfortunately." So there you go. I hold my hands up, you know, and that's ignorance on my part, because it's not a sport I follow, and I'm just making that assumption that football is really like a standout. Okay, so we'll use these two examples. Why would the WNBA and women's football, do you think, perhaps have a? If you think it does, there might be other sports again that I'm being ignorant to, but it does feel like there is an emphasis.
I think it's just a lot of people don't want to see women succeed at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They don't think they're at the same level as men, which is understandable, but it's getting a lot better. Right before this, I looked up like the 100-meter dash world record for women, and it's like 10.94, I think I saw. Then like in the 1950s for the men's 100 meters, it was 11 point something. So, you know, it's gonna get higher up. So, you know, I think women's sports are progressively gonna improve and get to that level closer to men.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think people underestimate the progress that you can make just by investing more time, more education, more coaching, improvement of, you know, just providing grassroots level investment. It's stunning what you can achieve. I think you're spot on, Says. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate you jumping in. You've educated me on NBA and that side of things. It's certainly not a sport I was familiar with, and the hatred on that side either. So you've definitely taught me there. But thank you. Any closing words?
Just give it a try. You know, if you give something a try, you never know. You might end up liking it like I did.
Yeah, lovely stuff. Cesar, thank you so much, my friend.
Cheers.
Lovely stuff. Before I get our next guest, just a couple of comments to read out from the chat box. Paul says, sorry that you had to make this show today. Like I have said in live chats on the show, Tom, I totally support Arsenal FC and all of our great talented boys and girls and women and men's teams as well. Paul loves to use Drew's emoji in the chat box as well. And, you know, don't apologise, Paul. I like doing this. I like tackling these tough topics. I like talking about it. I know why you said sorry, but I like discussing this. I think, you know, doing this show, getting some of the calls we've had on today, you know, hearing from Innie and his experiences in coaching, Alex, of course, his experiences in coaching, hearing Lila, speak about her own challenges, and hearing Kay earlier as well talk about kind of his journey in some ways of being very neutral to it and then gradually getting more involved in it, and everybody else has phoned in as well. And we're not done because we've got some more callers hopefully as well. The link, if you would like to, I've got 1 or 2 more slots left. If you call in, you will get on within the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. So please do not hesitate. I've left another link. The link is also in the description if you refresh. Claire O'Brien says, your topic has made me comment for the first time. Well, Claire, firstly, thank you all for listening. Hey, more Arsenal games, the better. Mido. Darbas says, those comments are bad to see, but I think it doesn't show the majority of fans' opinion. In Australia, the women's national team have sold out something like the last 13 home games, including the World Cup, which is obviously great to see. And I think you're right. Obviously, it doesn't. We are talking about a minority, I think, which is obviously a good thing, but it's how we decrease that minority even further so that the women's game is appreciated by even more people. And Andre here says, there's probably a lot of sports that I don't enjoy watching, but to repeatedly go around and talk about how much I don't like them, especially in spaces that do enjoy them, just seems ridiculous. And I think that was really, really well put as well by Andre. All right, let's bring in Shanot to the conversation. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
Yeah, Tom, doing pretty well. Can you hear me properly?
I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you fine.
All right. So first of all, really great that you're doing one of these phone-ins, and I try and join whenever I can, especially with this topic currently, because we're on international break. I mean, the men's team, the women's team is obviously playing,
still going.
And the Arsenal, as Ian rightfully said, it's about supporting the whole. It's not just about supporting just the one team, just the men's team, but the academy teams, the women's team. It's the whole thing. So I wanted to talk about women's sports in general, because recently I actually professionally, I'm a freelance sports commentator. So I commentate in English and also in my native language, which is Bengali. So I commentate on football and cricket mostly. So what I've noticed is, with age level football, the game is growing, especially in a country like Bangladesh. I've seen fans flocking into the stadiums and watching the game, especially when the under 19, under 16 women's team is playing in Bangladesh, in a place like Bangladesh, which you have to consider where we're from. We're a Muslim country, first of all. So women playing any sort of sports, wearing shirts or shorts, is shunned upon. So they face massive challenges just to try and make it, just to try and get into a system. So this is something that is changing in our country, in a place like Bangladesh. And number two is when people start supporting it as well. And the same goes for the cricket team. Currently, the Australia women's team, they're touring Bangladesh for the first time for a bilateral series. You know what it means? Like, they play 3 ODIs and then they play 3 T20s following this. I don't know how much you follow cricket, but
I'm not an I used to watch the highlights of the Ashes every time it came around, but that was about my maximum.
Right. So they're currently touring, and because you have this women's championship which the ICC have placed, it's made a lot more teams visit places like us. It's made India, Pakistan, and now Australia visit Bangladesh. So the women's game is growing, but the challenges, as you've rightly pointed out, with sort of people just not rating women's sport in general, are there. But in places like Bangladesh, the challenges are like probably 20, 50 times even, I'd say, greater, because of the social constructs that we have, the way our people here view or treat women as a whole, where most of them aren't allowed to do a lot of things that women in the Western world would be allowed to do. It could be culture, it could be religion, a lot of things. So to see the game progressing, I personally would have to say that that's a massive positive, that even in a place like Bangladesh, we're getting that opportunity. And for me personally, as a commentator as well, because they're allowing newer and more people into this sort of line. We had a female commentator come from India to commentate in the last match. So just as an example that the game is growing, but I really hope that more and more people start watching football, the women's game, because from what I've seen in recent years, the game has grown. And one of my first memories with Arsenal and the women's team is that the season we finished 8th, and the women's team won the league, and there weren't so many people. So that was my first eye opener. Like, hey, the women's team is actually doing well. We have a women's team, and hey, let's follow this. And when I read up on it, or when I read up on it back then, I'm like, oh, we're the most successful women's team in English football. Oh, we've actually won the Champions League for a change. So it's worth getting more eyes into the women's game. And Emirates sold out recently for the North
number of
London
games.
derby.
Number of games. The Manchester United game, I think, as well, sold out.
Exactly. And then you look at the Man City versus Man United game, which is happening at the Etihad. I think that's got over 40,000 tickets sold. I saw a tweet recently from Man City Social. So stuff like that, I think, is really positive. And I hope that people, and I appreciate the fact that you did a show on this in particular, because I hope more and more people can become more accepting of women's sports. And I don't want to take too long. I just want to end on this, that women's sport, when it comes to tennis, for instance, if you follow tennis and you're familiar with Billie Jean King, then you will know that in tennis, they pay the men and the women the same amount of prize money for Grand Slams. And that's because of Billie Jean King winning the Battle of the Sexes. And what it comes down to at the end of the day, in international sport or in any sport per se, is the number of people that are watching, the sponsors involved, because the money only comes through. Exactly. It's not always a misogynistic or a sexist thing where if women are getting paid less, because the American football team, Megan Rapinoe, I think she made a massive case about it, right? When you have more and more people watching, and if the product is sellable and it's got more sponsors involved, the money will come.
I mean, just look at how money in the men's game. If you look at what players were paid at the start of the millennium, for instance, and you look at what they're paid now, it's drastically different. And if you look at the numbers of people that are watching the men's game compared to back in the start of 2000, you understand the reasons as to why, and the broadcasting side of things has gone up massively. And if you look at the women's game, the pay in the women's game, the transfer fees in the women's game has only gone in one direction, which is up, and so I highly doubt the women's game will ever reach the figures that we start to see. But there will be, I think, in the next at least 5 years, the first £1 million women player. I think there will be. And I can absolutely see women getting paid, probably at the top level, similar wages to what we see perhaps in slightly further down the English footballing pyramid in particular, as things start to gradually improve, which is obviously a really positive thing. In fact, I'm not in line with, not in line, that's the wrong word. I'm not aware really of women's football WSL wages, but it's something I need to have a look into. It's certainly something that I think I need to educate myself on more, just to see what the level is at now and maybe where it's gone. But I can certainly guarantee that it's only gone in one direction in the last 20 years. Any final words, John? Because I want to get Earl on next, is our next caller. Any final words, mate?
Well, one question that I have for you,
and no,
the viewers,
go for it.
Is that when it comes to Arsenal this season, the women's team, and the amount of investment that has actually gone on with everything, the players that we've brought on, Russo included, do you think that we're performing in accordance to what we've done, or are we underperforming? Do you feel like we let the league slip in recent weeks, especially with the last loss against Chelsea?
I think we are underachieving. Obviously, we went out to Manchester City in the FA Cup, which you could argue, with how good they've been this season as well, that maybe you can reason with that. Going out to Paris in the qualification for the Champions League was a massive disappointment. And there's something to be said, obviously, about the qualification process, I think, for WSL teams in the Champions League. If Arsenal finish third, for instance, this season, they'll have to go through 2 qualification rounds to get back into the Champions League for next season, which could prove tricky, but they should be expected to do that. I think Jonas Eidevall is under pressure, especially with the players that have been brought in. I still think there's areas of the squad that can be improved. Goalkeeper in particular, I think, is the key one people are talking about a lot, and there's a reason why Arsenal have been linked with Mary Earps quite considerably in the last year. So I think you'd have a really good argument to say we have underachieved this season for sure. We haven't been as competitive as we should have been. And I mean, even though we had the sock controversy at Stamford Bridge, the other week, I feel like the performance did not reflect the side that should have been on display that day. So, yeah, does that answer the question?
That does. Let's hope for the best.
Thank you, mate. Always a pleasure to speak with you, and I'll speak to you soon.
You too.
Thanks, Shanor. Some really good insight from someone, of course, who's working in the industry as well on that side of things. So fantastic. Plenty of love to be shown as well. Let's bring in who could be our final corner. I'm happy to have a couple more on. I've still got some time. But Earl is up next. Earl, how are you, my friend?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Good stuff. I see you've even labelled women's football in your subject heading, which
Well,
is
come on. You've got to do
really
things properly,
picking it
ain't
up. Love it, mate. Tell me why this topic has grasped your attention.
I think the guys in the comments have just tried to get reaction out of you, to be fair. You've taken it quite...
never happened.
No, but you've taken... I've seen how it's kind of hurt you a bit,
Oh, sometimes, yeah. Happy to admit that, yeah.
But when it comes to women's football, after this World Cup that's just gone, the female World Cup, I thought the women's games improved big time. Absolutely big time. Like, my niece plays football and my son plays football, and they're playing against a team full of girls. Hello?
You're back, Earl. Your connection's a little bit in and out, but we
okay, sorry.
Keep going. That's right.
Yeah. So my son played against his under 11s team played against an under 11s girls team, and
interesting.
I think about 8 of the girls were Arsenal Academy girls.
Okay.
But they were really, really good, really good.
Yeah.
So it's just about how they get taught, isn't it? Obviously, they're not going to have as much power as boys growing up, because that's
biology. You can't really mess with that, Yeah.
But other than that, they can be technically as good as any man.
I think there's so many aspects of what can be coached, and it's that investment in coaching in the women's game that hasn't been there for so long, that is now obviously improving drastically. But the best football coaches in the world will be going to the men's side. That's just the way that it will, because the money's there, the pathways are there, the scouting is there, the headhunting is there. But it doesn't mean, obviously, that we can't drastically improve women's coaching. And I'd be curious to get your answer to this, Earl. How far away do you think we are to a female manager in the men's game?
I'd say within the next 10 years, definitely, 100%.
You really think so? Yeah.
Yeah. And it will be whichever manager wins the World Cup for England, I reckon. If the girls win the World Cup.
Yeah, of course. It's really interesting to see if that might happen. I think there's a lot of emphasis on like the women's on a female manager or head coach. We don't even see necessarily enough just coaches. In backroom staff, there's not enough kind of coaches. Let alone we talk about kind of managers at the moment. So that's something that I think obviously we need to find that pathway toward as well. We're seeing it obviously from an officiating standpoint. At the end of 2023, we had the first female Premier League referee, which is obviously great. We've had for a long time female assistant referees, but that's improving as well. What do you make of it when kind of you've seen the comments? I'll throw it up on the screen one more time for people that missed it earlier, but like the response we get. You said that obviously people are trying to get a rise from me sometimes, which there is always going to be an element of. I appreciate that, but there are some people that I think in those comments, and one that I put up earlier, if I can find it, I'll throw it up again, saying like that they genuinely hate. Here it is here. So long-time listener, I love your work, but I don't appreciate your snide remarks about people who don't watch women's football. I hate women's football because I think the standards are crap, but respect anybody who does. There's no issue. You can't just assume everybody who doesn't like women's football is misogynistic or less of a fan because it's just incorrect. I mean,
he's just being ignorant, isn't he?
Yeah,
You know?
I'd say
He's
yes.
very narrow-minded, isn't it? I bet he does it. How's he going to know if it's improved if he doesn't watch it?
I mean, you raise a point I can't argue with. So how can you know how the
You know,
standard is if you don't see it? Because I can guarantee you the only things that they will be seeing will be the misogynistic highlight reels that they get
Yeah.
tweeted on their timelines. You know,
And people like this, they need to just watch Lauren James. Watch her with the ball at her feet, because she's really, really good. And I
Fantastic.
know I'm an Arsenal supporter through and through, but
you can always appreciate a good footballer.
Yeah, when she was playing for England, that's when I noticed her. But the way she, how can I say it? The way she, her touch basically of the ball, the way she
technical
controls
ability.
the ball, amazing, man. I'm like, I'm in awe of it, because it's like not many men can do that. Not even in our men's game now.
No, I think that like every individual is going to be different, you know, and in that game, you know, it shows you what I think how the standards have come so far forwards. And perhaps if we'd not, you know, Lauren James is still a very young player in the grand scheme of the women's game as well. And so if we hadn't have invested the time, if there wasn't this emphasis on trying to improve the exposure to it, Lauren James may never have come to be as we know her to be so fantastic and frustratingly, from an Arsenal perspective, frustratingly good. You know, because we'd rather she was playing for Arsenal, of course, and not
I
against
think
us.
that's your £1 million player as well.
She could be.
Yeah, I think she'll be your £1 million player.
Yeah, I say
think
next
she
5
will be.
years, I think you might see the first £1 million, maybe even sooner. You know, I don't know who is it who holds the record. Is it Alessia Russo that holds the record? But the most expensive female footballer, football transfer. I don't know if it is Alessia Russo.
It's always Russo to Arsenal.
It says here, as of March 2024, Rachel Kundanyanji, who's gone from Madrid to Bay FC, who went for £685,000. Yeah, so recently Russo's record, if it was Russo, has been beaten. But I mean, we're 300 grand away from the first £1 million female footballer. Russo was free. You're right. Hey, that's a really good point. So who was it though? I was sure there was. Oh, I tell you what it was. Did Arsenal put a record bid for Mary Earps? I think that might be the case.
Let me
Google that now, because I want to get this right. I'm sure.
I think they put a record bid in for Russo. I think at the window before.
Yes,
but they
right.
wouldn't sell her.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think it is a record bid for Russo. Yeah. Arsenal bid a world record amount of £500,000 for Russo in January, which was turned down. So there you go. That's where we thought, but eventually she ended up being free. Oh, thank you for your time, mate. I'm gonna have to wrap up the show now because I've got to go cook my own dinner. In fact, I enjoy it because I don't. Are you a man that loves his cooking?
Of course I do, man.
Yeah, I honestly, I know.
Got to be a bit of rice and peas though, and a bit of chicken, you know.
Mate, you'd have to make me some. Thank you, mate. I appreciate it.
Yep. Okay. See you later, Tom. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Phil. I've got lamb chops tonight, which I do enjoy to make, which is great. But again, thank you to Earl. Appreciate it. I'll tell you what, big tip when you're cooking meat of any type. I know we've gone off a bit of a tangent, but I'm passionate about my food. Is make sure you take it out of the fridge for a good hour and a half, which is what I've done before you cook it. Because then, if you ever found when you're cooking like a steak or something, as soon as you put it in the pan, it starts to curl up, or like with bacon, it's because you didn't take it out the fridge first. That's why. Top tip. There you go. The cooking channel. Anyway, I did say that would be our last caller, so it is. So there's a few of you that have been waiting down below. Sorry that we haven't had time to get you on the show today, but I have got to wrap up. I've been going for 90 minutes. But it's been genuinely one of the best phone-in shows we have done. And I'm so glad that I got the opinions of so many people. It was great to hear from people with different views. There was part of me, and I don't know why, maybe it's the content creator in me, wanted to get somebody on that was like one of those people that left those horrible comments. There's always part of you that wants to just try and get into the mind of someone who would say such horrible things, that has this innate, for some reason, dislike of women. It's not even just women's football, but I think there's a misogyny that exists, sadly, that leads to some of these comments being left. And I will end the show as I started the show, which obviously was talking about what I think the line is. And I want to make sure that it's really coherently clear as to where my stance is on this thing. If you don't have an interest in women's football, that is fine. If you don't like women's football, that is fine. You don't have to watch it. I'm not going to tell you to watch this channel if you don't like it. It's the same thing. You know, if you don't like something, if you haven't got an interest in it, don't watch it, right? When people start to cross the line is when you start having to desperately publicize the fact that you don't like it, when you desperately try and tell me that you don't want to hear about it, and when you've got all the tools in the world, you've got that little fast forward button which you can use. I leave chapters at the start of every single show that after it's, of course, finished its live stream, which you can skip past the bits you don't want to listen to. I give you all the tools in the world that you need to not hear what you don't want to hear. So please, I implore you, take heed in that regard, you know, and even if maybe you don't have an interest in it, you know, you've not watched it in a long time, please give it a chance, because it might surprise you. The community in particular on the Arsenal side of things is amazing. We've got some fantastic people who cover women's football. Of course, at our live event this year, we had Tim Stillman, who does some brilliant work around the women's game and covering it, of course, as well for Arsblog. So you can listen to the Arsenal Women's podcasts on the Arscast as well with Tim, but he was fantastic on our live show that we did in London a few weeks ago. And there's lots of other people as well. I'm very happy to say that we'll have a live show for you tomorrow evening as well. 5 o'clock, I'll be joined by Laura Kirk-Francis as well, who also was at the live event we had, and Umar Chowdhury, of course, who you'll remember from the Arsenal Way. Umar and TC back together. It's good to see. Thank you so much to everybody that's joined us in the chat box. I saw a couple of comments that were trying to get a little bit of a rise at the start of the video, and I'm really happy that towards the end of it they've flitted away, and also none of them appeared, because they never do. You don't get the trolls. They just never arrive. They never, ever do. But thank you so much for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world and are listening. And I will see you tomorrow morning, of course, bright and early for the 8 a.m. show, which you can find every single day on the channel. Stay safe, stay well. This bit's important. Stay happy, and even more important, respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.